Wishes well doing and welcome back to After They Found Atlantis. Class, today we're going to make a study of, was Atlantis real? Was it actually real? So let's get right into it. Who was the man who gave us Atlantis? There was one man who gave us all we know about Atlantis. Anybody? Go ahead and raise your hand. You. Yeah, raise your hand. Yep. Who gave us Atlantis? Can you use the bathroom? Yes, go ahead, use the bathroom. Anybody else? Who's the man who gave us Atlantis? Who's the man who gave us Atlantis? Starts with a P, ends with a... Yep, go ahead. Yep. What was that? Plato. Yes, Plato. Plato's the man. Plato's the one person where all we know about Atlantis comes from in his two dialogues that he recorded called the Timaeus and the Critias, right? But mainstream archaeology will say no. It's made up. It's completely made up. It's a made-up story. All academia says it's made up. But there's one person who says it's not made up, and that person is... There's one very important person who says it's not made up. And who is that person? That person is Plato. Plato says over and over again in the dialogues, not once, not twice, not three times, but more, that it is real. Here, he's saying, then listen, Socrates, to a tale which, though strange, is certainly true, having been attested by Solon, who was the wisest of the seven sages. Now we're talking about Atlantis, right? This is all about Atlantis. Here's Socrates saying, very good. And what is this ancient famous action of the Athenians which Critias declared on the authority of Solon not to be a mere legend, but an actual fact? An actual fact. Read it for yourselves. It's right there. It's right in the books. Here again, talking about Atlantis. Tell us, said the other, the whole story and how and from whom Solon heard this veritable tradition. What does veritable mean? Definition of veritable, being in fact the thing named and not false, unreal, or imaginary. This is fact, over and over again. And you might say, well, it's the translation. The translation is bad. This is Benjamin Jowett. All these quotes are from Benjamin Jowett's translation of Plato. And now, here's what Bury says. This is the Bury translation. He says it this way. He says, then listen, Socrates, to a tale which, though passing strange, is yet wholly true, as Solon, the wisest of the seven, once upon a time declared. This is a different translation. So it's the same thing. He says it's wholly true. Oh, and I can go on. There's more. Here, back to Jowett again. Here's Socrates saying, and what other Critias can we find that will be better than this, which is natural and suitable to the festival of the goddess, and has the very great advantage of being a fact, and not a fiction. It's a fact, and not a fiction. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with mainstream archaeology saying all that what Plato tells us is a lie. It's not true, he didn't mean it. They have no answer for him saying all this. Why is he repeating it over and over again that it's all real? They just have no answer. He's playing mind games. He's trying to teach us a lesson. Who knows? But today we're going to illustrate why Atlantis is real, because there's more. So let's get started. All the information about Atlantis comes from one place, and that place is the city of Sais in Egypt. To this city came Solon, who found all the information of Atlantis recorded in the sacred registry. That sacred registry from today is 10,000 years old. Could the city of Sais be that old? The answer is yes. Archaeology has found recently that this city dates back to the Neolithic period.
We detected in some of the sections of the pit that there was Saite period pottery, and this told us this might be useful and interesting places to look for evidence of the Saite period. But in fact, when we excavated, what we found was the Neolithic period, so 4,000 years BC. So using dewatering equipment to keep the water out of the trench, the bottom of this trench are Neolithic layers. Above it are material from the Butamani period, 2500 BC. So it was very interesting. And so now I'm also a prehistoric archaeologist. You can't help it in archaeology. You always find something you did not expect. So this is why we do it.
The archaeologist is surprised at her findings that the city of Sais goes back into the Neolithic period. That is because modern-day archaeology does not recognize the information in the dialogues. And the information in the dialogue states that the city has had continual occupation going back 10,000 years and had recorded things far into the past, such as Atlantis. Herodotus tells us that the city once rivaled Karnak in Egypt. In fact, the city of Sais was once the capital of Egypt, and it's a little known fact that the Rosetta Stone actually originated from the city of Sais. The whole reason why we even understand hieroglyphics, the Egyptian hieroglyphics, is because of a stone that originated in the city of Sais. According to the dialogues, the city of Sais has a patron goddess, and that goddess is called Neith. The people living in the city assert that Neith is the same as Athena, and that is why Solon, the Athenian, was so well received there. The dialogues say that Neith founded the city 8,000 years before Solon's visit. Could the goddess Neith go back that far into Egyptian history? The answer is yes. The very first queen of Egypt had Neith in her name, and she ruled over the city of Sais. Because the worship of the goddess Neith goes back to the times even before Egypt's first dynasty. Before King Tut, before Akhenaten, before the Great Pyramids, before the first king of Egypt. The dialogues are telling us that Neith is the most ancient, and Egyptian history says it's true. We will find by looking in the dialogues that the geography described is very accurate. Here, Critias is talking about his home country, Greece. The whole country is only a long promontory extending far into the sea away from the rest of the continent. And here, the Egyptian priest is describing the Mediterranean Sea. For this sea, which is within the Straits of Hercules, is only a harbor having a narrow entrance. And you might say, well, Plato could have known how old the city was, possibly, and Plato could have known that Neith went back far into history, and he may have known that Greece comes out from the continent, and Plato could have known the Mediterranean. This doesn't prove anything about Atlantis being real, but there are things in the dialogue that make us ask the question, how could have Plato known this? How could have Plato known this? For this sea, which is within the Straits of Hercules, is only a harbor having a narrow entrance, but that other is a real sea. Here, the dialogues are describing the real sea, which is the Atlantic Ocean. And are you ready for this? The dialogues talk about an opposite continent. For these histories tell of a mighty power which unprovoked made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia, and to which your city put an end. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean, for in those days the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits, which are by you called the Pillars of Hercules. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands, and from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent, which surrounds the true ocean. For this sea which is within the Straits of Hercules is only a harbor having a narrow entrance, but that other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a boundless continent. Now in this land of Atlantis There was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others, and over parts of the continent. So amazingly, the dialogues are describing the opposite continent, the Americas, and the true ocean, which is the Atlantic Ocean. And now, the dialogues are telling us about the 10,000-year-old history of Greece and how the once full landmass has now just become a skeleton of what it once was. How could have Plato have known this? Listen to this part. How shall I establish my words, and what part of it can truly be called a remnant of the land that then was? The whole country is only a long promontory extending far into the sea away from the rest of the continent. While the surrounding basin of the sea is everywhere deep in the neighborhood of the shore, many great deluges have taken place during the 9,000 years, for that is the number of years which have elapsed since the time which I am speaking. And during all this time, and through so many changes, there has never been any considerable accumulation of the soil coming down from the mountains, as in other places. But the earth has fallen away all around and sunk out of sight. The consequence is that in comparison of what then was, there are remaining only the bones of the wasted body, as they may be called, as in the case of small islands, all the richer and softer parts of the soil having fallen away, and the mere skeleton of the land being left.
Now we're going to focus on the transition from the Pleistocene to the Holocene as the Ice Age ends and how this impacts humans. So we have to imagine all this Arctic ice melting, and it's going to have a huge impact on the landscape around humans. It's going to cause an increase in sea levels, just as we're experiencing today as our climate warms. It's also going to cause a change in weather patterns, which we're also experiencing today. Notably, in Greece, much more rainfall, which really impacts the landscape. So let's first check out sea level rise by looking at the Cycladic Islands in the middle of the Aegean. And there's a large number of small and large islands in this region. And in the past, after 130 meters of sea level rise, we can understand that things probably looked much, much different in the past. So here's what it looked like in the past, this sort of Paleocycladic plateau. It would have been very, very different. Most of the land is now underwater. And it was much closer to the mainland, so far easier to reach. And so we've lost much of our evidence, of course, for early hunter-gatherers in the late Paleolithic and Mesolithic, because those sites are now underwater. What we think of as islands today at sea level would have actually in the past been mountain peaks and even large upland plateaus.
Are you still with me? Good. I want to look at this other thing in the dialogue here. It has to do with the ancient Egyptian, the priest that gave Solon all the information about Atlantis. He's telling Solon that mankind has been and will be destroyed, or practically destroyed. And this is why we lose our history, because in a cycle, this event happens and it brings us back to the Stone Age where we can't write anymore. So we lose our history, and this will probably happen again. Hopefully not soon, but here it is. Another fact in the dialogues that can be true or has a possibility of being true.
Thereupon, one of the priests, who was of a very great age, said, "O Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children, and there is not an old man among you." Solon, in return, asked him what he meant. "I mean to say," he replied, "that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you why. There have been, and will be again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and other lesser ones by innumerable other causes. There is a story, which even you have preserved, that once upon a time, Paethon, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now, this has the form of a myth, but really signifies a declination of the bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth, which recurs after long intervals. At such times, those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. And from this calamity, the Nile, who is our never failing saviour, delivers and preserves us. When, on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a deluge of water, the survivors in your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell on the mountains. But those who, like you, live in cities are carried by the rivers into the sea. Whereas in this land, neither then nor at any other time does the water come down from above on the fields, having always a tendency to come up from below, for which reason the traditions preserved here are the most ancient. The fact is that wherever the extremity of winter frost or of summer does not prevent, mankind exist, sometimes in greater, sometimes in lesser numbers. And whatever happened either in your country or in ours, or in any other region of which we are informed, if there were any actions, noble or great, or in any other way remarkable, they have all been written down by us of old, and are preserved in our temples. Whereas, just when you and other nations are beginning to be provided with letters and the other requisites of civilized life, after the usual interval, the stream from heaven, like a pestilence, comes pouring down, and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. And so you have to begin all over again like children, and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either among us or among yourselves.